Again for staying with Africa News Network, First Fast Live on DSTV 405. My name is Cindy Mabi and I'm joined by my colleague Clive Ramatibela-Smith.
Welkom terug.
Welkom terug, julle hoor. Goeienaand. Now, top story this hour, the DA-UDM coalition in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality is on the rocks after Mayor Ethel Trollip fired his deputy Mongameli Bonani from a mayoral committee. And the UDM is not taking this unilateral action lying down.
Bobani was fired as mayoral committee member for public health after his relationship with Trollip broke down irreparably. Trollip says Bobani had consistently been at odds with the coalition partners since the coalition was formed in August. Meanwhile, the UDM has slammed the decision and unilaterally and demanded a meeting with all coalition partners. Now it remains to be seen if the Democratic Alliance leader Mmusi Maimane can hold the coalition together.
There is no doubt that this decision is unilateral. And he seemed to treat the UDM and other parties, I guess, that we are there on their favors. He should be reminded that the DA did not win the municipality of that area. Neither the ANC did. The keys were with the small parties and we're still holding those keys. When we have agreed that if there is a problem, these are the steps must be taken, we are going to follow that. He will have to swallow his pride. If there is a partner which is not happy, the matter must be tabled at that level. And I even suggested that Maimane and I have agreed to have two people from other parties to investigate these allegations. Until that is done, everyone must wait, or else any unilateral decision. You can't blame UDM that it is breaking the coalition. Thank you.
Now, the fallout raises the following questions. Firstly, are cracks in the Nelson Mandela Bay Council a sign of things to come in other coalition-run metros? And is the coalition of politically divergent parties inherently destined to end in a disaster? And is unity against the ANC alone enough to hold opposition coalition partners together?
Ethel Trollip, the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality, joins us on the phone line right now. And top of the evening to you, Squire. Just a question, maybe General Bantu Holomisa is of the view that things have become quite intense.
Yeah.
So just if your response going forward with the coalition of the Nelson Mandela Bay.
It's very interesting that you would suggest that Bantu Holomisa believes that things are getting quite antagonistic between the DA and the UDM. And if they are antagonistic, it would be entirely because of the fact that over the last 4.5 months, despite every effort to resolve this impasse, every effort to deal with the challenges in this coalition government at a national level, where every single complaint that I have laid about Councillor Bobani was being corroborated with evidential proof in writing and legal opinions and recordings, etc., 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 that the UDM has done absolutely nothing about these issues of complaint about one of our coalition partners. I also have on record a letter that was given to both the leaders of our parties, respective parties, from the rest of the mayoral committee and the other cooperating parties, that my side of the events are corroborated by my colleagues, and that Councillor Bobani's complaints or figments of his imagination, and there has not been one shred of corroborating evidence with every single complaint he has laid, nor have there been any evidence with the charges that he has laid against senior executive administrators in this administration and also against myself. So the situation has become untenable because despite the provisions of our coalition agreement, the UDM have taken no steps whatsoever against their councillor, and the situation has become untenable because we have a coalition partner in our coalition that is more antagonistic towards the coalition than the other opposition parties combined.
Now, the UDM leader has also called you a bully, saying that the coalition partners are essentially not accountable to you and that you are destroying the Nelson Mandela coalition. What is your response?
Well, that's absolutely unbelievable. It's amazing, the comment that he's made, because we are in a coalition. The Democratic Alliance is 47%. The UDM is fractionally under 2%. The other two participating parties have got around 1%. There are mechanisms in our coalition agreement to deal with problems. These problems have been dealt with. They've been taken to the national level. Every time General Holomisa has asked for corroborating correspondence or information or legal opinions, they've been furnished to him. The only problem is that he has got a blind spot with regards to Councillor Bobani, and he hasn't taken any action against the allegations of impropriety and lack of collegiality by his councillor. Now, I can't do anything about that. The UDM must do what they must do with their councillors. The Democratic Alliance must do what they must do with their councillors. And if the two parties can't agree to how they're going to deal with that, well, then we have an impasse. And right now we have an impasse in our coalition because General Bantu Holomisa's councillor is in direct opposition with our coalition. Now, I've got a letter that I can give you where all the other coalition partners, including the rest of my mayoral committee, are in support of me and are in opposition with Councillor Bobani. So either they're all wrong and Councillor Bobani is wrong with General Holomisa's blessing, or the rest of us are all wrong. So, really, Councillor General Holomisa is not being frank and honest with you when he says that it's me that's responsible for the fallout in this coalition.
Yeah, but the decision sounds to have been made unilaterally, making it sound like perhaps maybe they were not made part of the consultation or even get involved, any input from the UDM. Would you agree with that?
I reject that outright. There is a record of every single meeting that we've held with the UDM. I have a record of every single piece of correspondence that we've had with the UDM. I have a record of proposals that we made about how we could resolve this impasse, proposals that General Holomisa did not respond to. Over a period of weeks, despite them having a National Executive Committee, he summoned Councillor Bobani to a National Executive meeting with the instruction that he must bring the evidence to substantiate his allegations and his charges. That evidence has not appeared before the UDM. So the facts speak of something entirely different to what General Holomisa is saying.
Considering the UDM is still part of the coalition in the Nelson Mandela Bay, are you willing to make amends and engage them going forward?
Well, that's the point, and it's also on record in communication, that we have a national agreement with the United Democratic Movement to form a coalition government in the Nelson Mandela Bay municipalities and other municipalities. However, they also need to understand that discipline and camaraderie and cooperation are fundamental to the success of a coalition, and they need to make sure that that happens. So the decision is entirely in their court. If they want to remain a member of our coalition, they need to take the necessary steps against Councillor Bobani, and they know what those steps are, and it's entirely up to them. That is a decision that they will make, and if they don't make that decision, we will make the decision ourselves.
So if we were to put this into context, then the Councillor Bobani remains Deputy Mayor despite all this. Is that something that you would be under review in the future?
Well, if this impasse is not resolved before the next council meeting, this matter will serve before council to remove him as the Deputy Mayor as well.
All right, and joining us in studio is Professor Sipho Siepe, political analyst. Sepo Khadima is a political analyst on the line. You heard the DA Mayor for the Nelson Mandela Bay, Ethel Trollip, talking about essentially difficulties, or to put it lightly, it just seems that there's a lover's squabble in that particular metro. Good evening, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us. Now, having spoken to Mr. Trollip, it sounds that they are very comfortable as the Democratic Alliance at NMB. They had a 47% voter turnout, and the UDM is minuscule. That's something that they can dispose of. Is that the same impression you have?
Yeah, I think it's not an impression, it's a fact. And one should actually say governing on its own, even with all your members coming from one party, it's always difficult. It's not easy, even within the areas where the ANC is in total control. That's why you have the cabinet or committees where there's engagement around issues. But when you have a coalition, you also have to manage, beyond managing the disagreements within your own members, you must also manage the people who politically and ideologically might not be on your side. So when you listen to Trollip, he paints a picture of having tried a lot, taking time to say, let us work together. But it is not working. And part of it is because those issues that brought them together were more about putting the ANC out rather than to say what we have in common. What they have in common is probably the dislike for the ANC. But one should not be opposed to coalitions. Coalitions are also spaces where there could be a lot of innovation, and where, given our history, where we're so far apart, we can actually find each other. But what is very clear here, and what has been said by the DA, not only in Nelson Mandela, but also where it is in coalition, like in Gauteng, is that a kingmaker is not a king. And they've been making, for instance, the EFF has been making claims that it is a kingmaker. But when Mashaba makes decisions, what he tends to do is to look at what the DA says. And even my man said it very clearly, that you need to understand that the EFF came to us, we didn't go to it. So we are going to govern in terms of the dictates of our own party. So there's an element of, or you can call it arrogance, but they are also saying, remember, you got only 2% or less than 2%. We got 47%. So your right to speak must be proportional to the support that you enjoy. So anybody who is in that position will act that way. But this coalition was going to always have problems because the unity or what brought it together was more about putting certain people out rather than to have certain things in common.
Mr. Trollip actually goes on to say that it wasn't a grand anti-ANC coalition that brought them together to oust the incumbent. It was more about the people of South Africa. You can quantify those. The people of South Africa who have made their voice heard, and that's how they ended up in the majority in the various metros.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if you were to do polling amongst the residents of Nelson Mandela Bay municipality to find out how many of them are actually happy, how many of them they are receiving an improved service delivery levels, much better than what they had been accustomed to for years. How many of them would be able to say that, in fact, they are happy with the current situation? I mean, I think I remarked last year, and I'm quite surprised that they were able to hold it together for this long. It's just only a matter of time as to how long would they successfully pursue the art of the deal moment of Donald Trump. And now it seems that that is eluding them. But also very interesting is that General Bantu Holomisa speaks of having written a letter to Mmusi Maimane. And the letter is not replied to by Mmusi Maimane, but by none other than James himself. So there it tells you everything else in terms of who's really in charge of the Democratic Alliance. It might just be in name, that is Mmusi Maimane, but every action and negotiations during the coalition talks, for example, they were not led by, in fact, EFF said that. Said, listen, when we spoke to Mmusi, we had no idea what on earth he was talking about. And when we spoke to James himself, we realized that we can do a deal here. So that itself, I think, is just showing that this is a party that, it shows that they are in a very difficult terrain. But also they are very touchy about criticism. When you look at what they are demanding that this deputy mayor should do, withdraw the allegations that he has leveled against even the mayor, Arthur Trollip, you realize that we have a party here that is enjoying to dish out criticism to others, but when they are at the receiving end of such criticism, they get extremely touchy and extremely angry, and hence now the coalition is about to fall apart because of allegations that they should have just simply addressed, but they are refusing to address those. If anything, they are saying, well, it is forbidden for you even to suggest that Arthur Trollip could be, as they say, corrupt. And yet, it's the same party that is very readily on their lips to pronounce the words corruption against everybody else.
Thorn in the flesh. Thorn in the flesh. Now, I'm trying to picture this coalition, as you know very well, it's been talked about 2019, a possible coalition. And when we saw visuals of these multi-parties who are the opposition holding hands, marching to the Constitutional Court, you sense that there was some sort of unity and understanding. Obviously, this says governance is something completely and utterly different from becoming the opposition. Is there a lesson to be drawn out of that, Professor?
Well, we should not minimize the unity of this grouping. But what we need to do, we must look at what they are united in. They seem to be united in dislike of the president. The entire political programs of some of these parties is around Jacob Zuma. And one person who makes it even more clearer that the dislike and the activities and the programs around one person is Maimane himself. This is why he says he foresees, and correctly so, a situation where the ANC would be disrupted and it might end up breaking. And he's looking forward to working with the group of the ANC that also harbor the same dislike for Jacob Zuma. So what we have here is a unity that is fomented, or where the unity is really around, when you look at all other parties except DA, it's fomented around divorce issues. These are people who used to be in the same camp. The UDM used to be with the ANC. COPE used to be with the ANC. EFF used to be with the ANC. So there are divorce issues that they are dealing with. And the common denominator is Jacob Zuma. But then you have the DA, which sees Jacob Zuma as the weakest link to try to undermine the ANC. So it is also correct for the DA to say, actually, our attack is on the ANC. But to enter the ANC, we go through Jacob Zuma. But we're also going to exploit these guys who have divorce issues.
To continue the split. To continue the split.
Yes.
Could it be that it's rather not Zuma must fall, it's Zuma must stay, so that this crack can widen, so that therefore, in Maimane's words, that the advantage will be to the Democratic Alliance?
For as long as President Zuma is there, the unity will be sustained. That's how they reason. But for the DA, it's very clear that if they were to succeed in removing Jacob Zuma, he knows full well that will lead to a breakup of the ANC, because it does make sense. If COPE was formed because you removed a president who did not enjoy support, what more when you remove a president who still commands at least 4 or 5 provinces that are behind him? You're actually talking about the real collapse. That's why I say the best time to destroy the ANC is now, when you still have a president who enjoys support that is bigger than the small groupings that don't support him.
That's if they succeed in their campaign to force the ANC to recall its president, or for these marches to have any effect. But coming back to the political survival of the smaller parties, because it is expediency on their part to want to join with a party that is strong in a particular metro. And what it says to their constituencies. If you are COPE, for example, what do you stand for? If you are, IFP may have grown in numbers because of the demise of the National Freedom Party. So, in terms of leadership, is it just about hanging on to the semblance of power that you still have, and you latch on with the one blesser, if you will?
No, actually, you should look at the press conference. When you look at the press conference, they know who sits in the center. That is Maimane. And here's Terra, who had been involved in the struggle, being almost at the corner there. So effectively, they are not even taken seriously. So what they also know is that come the next election, they will cease to exist. And I think Maimane's posture is also indicative of where the power lies, or the influence lies within the alliance.
Look, I think my view is that, I mean, going forward, and in come 2019, we're probably going to have the announcement as they do in boxing and say, and the loser by self-inflicted blow is the opposition. Because if you look at it, they lack an appreciation of what are the real issues that can make a difference in terms of this country being a stable country that is economically growing, and the platitude and mantra of that we are fighting corruption, that is not going to hold, because that does not produce jobs, that does not ensure that we can have a country which, even in terms of social security and social development, we are able to give more than a living grant as we do, all of that. So their lack of appreciation, and they don't have solution, by the way. Many times they will speak about in hyperboles, or we need to do the following, well, this is the problem, but they can never really identify, well, what are the solutions? What are the things that need to be done? And that poverty of ideas is what is going to lead to their not being able to win. But I think also within the African National Congress itself, when you look at it, the way that things are going at the moment, there's going to be yet another breakaway faction come December. And we'll probably still see a ANC that is governing, and yet with a reduced margin because of the breakaway, not because of opposition.
Yeah. Now this is the question that we pose in terms of what brings the coalition together. What is their philosophy? And we asked Ethel Trollip how he would describe this grand anti-ANC coalition with its various dynamics going forward, and what the future holds for the coalition.
First of all, I wouldn't describe it as a grand anti-ANC coalition. What happened in the elections in August was a grand anti-ANC outcome of the elections, where the DA went from around 41% to 47%, the ANC went from 51% to 41%. So the electorate chose to vote for change. That's the grand change, nothing else. A grand coalition would imply that all the other opposition parties were in a coalition together against the ANC. The fact of the matter is that the people voted for change. The Democratic Alliance is the biggest party in the municipality, and we need to play a leadership role in that regard, and I plan to continue doing that.
Yeah, we also had this question, and the UDM makes it a point to remind the African National Congress and the DA that they were in actual fact the key players in making sure, because there was no outright winner. So they played a massive role in the DA basically running the metro. And so therefore you cannot afford to have smaller parties. Would you agree?
Well, man, listen, all I want to say in that regard, the only kingmakers here in this deal, the Democratic Alliance. If the Democratic Alliance hadn't got 47%, the UDM's 2% wouldn't have meant a thing. So we are actually the kingmakers. Without the votes that we got in this election, no other political parties would have been able to put a coalition together. So we need to understand that. And we also need to understand that in order to run a coalition, there has to be discipline. There has to be adherence to the undertakings and the commitments that we made in the coalition, and that applies to all the coalition parties.
So it remains to be seen if the UDM leader, General Bantu Holomisa, will buckle to the ultimatum posed by the Democratic Alliance to effectively remove the deputy mayor of the Nelson Mandela Bay, Mr. Bopani. And I think in terms of the coalition relationship going forward, it's something that's going to be quite tumultuous. But that's where we'll leave it for now.
Yeah, better the devil you know than the one you don't.
Thanks so much to Professor Sipho Siepe, political analyst, Sepo Khadima, political analyst, and on the line we had Mr. Ethel Trollip, Executive Mayor of the Nelson Mandela Bay. Thanks so much for joining us. We're back after this.